generations of the same family in a special edition of Inside Out.
Deformed, disabled, damaged. Thousands of babies around the world genetically harmed in the womb by one drug.
She can't go to the toilet, she can't walk, she can't talk.
We bring to light the records that show the British government knew the drug causes birth defects, yet chose to hide the truth from expectant mothers. Now, new scientific research warns sodium valproate's toxic legacy could be eternal, harming generation after generation.
It's because I took that medication. My grandkids have been affected by it. So many people's lives have been affected and ruined.
Well, this is all her fit medicine. This one here, I have to give her 3 times a day. This one twice a day, and this one twice a day.
Every morning, first thing, Karen carefully measures out the exact amount of medicine needed to keep her daughter alive, to save her from falling into a fatal coma.
Bridget got hiccups! You're going to swallow it. I know, it's horrible. You got to swallow it, though.
Bridget is 19. She still plays with some of the toys she had as a baby.
This is the photo album I done for Bridget when we came home. Pictures of her in a cart with her toys around because she could only just lay there still with her head to the side.
Bridget was born with a catastrophic array of medical ailments, including brain damage and spina bifida. She's paralysed from the waist down. Even her bowels aren't fully formed.
She can't go to the toilet, she can't walk, she can't talk. She can't think for herself. I do all Bridget's overall care. I think for Bridget, I talk for Bridget, I walk for Bridget, I live for Bridget.
When Karen was pregnant with Bridget, she was prescribed a high dosage of the drug sodium valproate. She has epilepsy, and the pills were meant to control the seizures. But the powerful chemicals that protected her health damaged her daughter's.
I pop these tablets into my system, and what happens? 6 months down the line, I'm under antenatal treatment, and then they turn around and look at me, look at the screen, and turn around and say to me, what do you want to do? You want to have an abortion, you're carrying a spina bifida baby.
Like Bridget, around 20,000 children in the UK and thousands of others around the world are believed to have fetal valproate syndrome after being exposed to the powerful drug valproic acid in the womb. Some of the children are so severely harmed they'll never develop beyond the mental capabilities of a toddler. Others may appear fine, but will struggle with cognitive and physical disabilities throughout their lives.
We know from our research that children who are exposed to sodium valproate can be affected physically, they can be affected mentally, and they can be affected psychologically.
These children have an increased risk of clefting, cleft palate, and these children are more prone to spina bifida or neural tube defect. We also know that there's an increased risk of congenital heart disease and occasionally an increased risk of kidney abnormalities.
I've come to Paris to meet the head of a charity that helps families struggling with fetal valproate syndrome. Maureen Martin's children also suffer from the condition.
This picture is terrible. It's a proof that I take valproate during pregnancy. Salome was a very strange face. She had the eyes very special and the nose very plate. You see, no lips, and the here the menton very small. It's not normal.
Both of Marine's children have abnormal facial features. They also suffer from neurological problems, but her son is most seriously harmed, with more apparent disabilities.
My son have malformation, problem of hypospadias, problem of hand, he have autism, problem of language, he have dyspraxia, he can write, for example, so a lot of problems.
Marine has been prescribed sodium valproate since childhood to control her epilepsy, but she says she was never warned that taking the drug whilst pregnant could damage her children. She only discovered the link by looking online.
Every day I take my drug valproate during my pregnancy. So I put in Google pregnancy valproate danger, and I find a website in Paris of an hospital who tell me that it was the more dangerous drugs if you take during pregnancy. And he talk about autism, he talk about malformation. So I was shocked, because why the doctor don't tell me that it was very dangerous for the pregnancy.
In a statement, Sanofi, the company that produces the drug, said,
Sanofi has always demonstrated full transparency to health authorities and initiated the updating of medical information for doctors and patients. Sanofi has systematically reminded patients via the information document that they should consult their prescribing physician in case of pregnancy or desire for pregnancy, so that their physician can act accordingly.
Since the anti-epilepsy drug was launched in the 1960s under various brand names, it's estimated that tens of thousands of women around the world have taken it during their pregnancies, unaware of the dangers. Karen is one of them.
I didn't think my child was going to be like how she is today. If I had known when Bridgie was inside me, if I had known now what I knew back then, I wouldn't have had my child.
Emma and Janet, based in northwest England, also took sodium valproate during their pregnancies. They say they weren't aware of any warnings and were given no indication of the danger by their doctors.
He didn't even tell me really to an effect that I had epilepsy to start with. When I got my first prescription, there was no warnings in the boxes at that point. I mean, we're talking 83, 84. So there was nothing for me at all.
My husband and I questioned the midwives, questioned neurologists, and to just be told, take this medicine, it's the best to control your seizures. That's great to control the seizures, but the baby.
After their children were born with disabilities, in 2013, Janet and Emma set up a charity that aims to ensure warnings are prominently displayed on the packaging of all sodium valproate drugs. Partly as a result of their campaign in 2016, the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency in the UK recommended that warning labels should be featured on all valproate-containing medicines. Family doctors must only prescribe the drug to women of childbearing age as a last option after explaining all the risks. But why has it taken 50 years to get the warning out? In the UK, the government regulates what information is provided to patients, and according to Emma and Janet, it knew about the dangers of the drug as far back as 1973. They discovered the evidence deep in the National Archives.
There we go. That statement similar to that proposed by ICI could be included on all relevant data sheets but not on packaging inserts. So there would be no danger of the patients themselves seeing it.
If they hadn't have made this decision,
Yeah.
you'd have been warned.
I'd have been warned, and probably the boys wouldn't have been harmed like they were.
The 20,000 affected,
Yeah.
there wouldn't be that today.
No.
In a statement, the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency said,
At the time, according to clinical practice, it was for the doctor to decide how much information a patient was given about their medicine. Since then, the need for patients to be fully informed about their medicine has been underpinned by legislation.
But the legislation is often proving ineffective. Over the last year, hundreds of babies around the world have been born with sodium valproate syndrome. charities say many pharmacists and health centres are still issuing the drugs in generic packaging with no warnings.
I have a contact in Belgium, I have contact in Switzerland and Italy, in Spain, because I live near Spain. In all Europe they give these drugs without information in the leaflet.
The fact that women are still not being made fully aware of the risk is particularly alarming, because among the affected families there's growing fear that fetal Valproate syndrome is actually being passed on through the genes from one generation to the next.
You fall down? Yeah?
3 generations of the same family. Here today in Liverpool are grandma, 2 grown-up daughters and their kids. Fetal Valproate syndrome has dominated their lives.
It's because I took that medication. That's why my kids haven't got a normal life, and they struggle every single day of their life to fit in and do things. One of my kids have tried to, couldn't cope, and tried to hang themselves.
Sue took the drug Epilepsy throughout her pregnancies and later discovered that it had left all of her children with mental disabilities. Now, her daughters are worried that their children have inherited the syndrome too.
Certain things that they're doing, like the behaviour ways, the way they're speaking. I've got 2 children, both have got dyslexia. My daughter's got dyslexia and dyscalculia, and she's in special needs school. My little boy's 9. He's got dyspraxia, learning difficulties, a bowel condition, sensory issues, memory problems. I never took the tablet, but then when I sit down and think about it, well, I've got facts, so it could be, they could have facts.
So far, Tanya and Natalie have never had any evidence to back up their gut feelings, but we've uncovered new scientific findings which could prove them right.
हम बुद्धे को ओलंपिक के लिए बनाएंगे ना पुलिस के साथ फाइट करेंगे ना क्या करेंगे.
To understand someone's story,
Чтобы наши дети жили в нормальных, красивых квартирах, и они были счастливы и рады.
you need to hear it in their own words.
If you speak about democracy, you are repressive. Just speak.
Storyville Global on BBC World News.
Hello, I'm Yalda Hakim, coming to you live from the south of Mosul. I'm Yalda Hakim in Cambodia.
Just a few weeks ago, ISIS was beheading people in these streets. To fully understand what's going on in the world, you have to get out in the field and hear people's stories.
I like the way you dance.
Back in the Impact studio, I share those stories with my global audience.
You, Yalda.
I'm Yalda Hakim. Join me on my show Impact on BBC World News.
Whilst researching this film, we spoke to several families who suspect that sodium valproate is somehow not just harming their children, but their grandchildren too. Until now, those suspicions have not been deemed credible. But we've obtained the results of a major scientific project in South Korea, which actually supports the idea that the drug can harm successive generations. Chan Young-shing, a professor of pharmacology, is leading the research that uses pregnant mice injected with the compound. What does your research actually prove?
We're giving the indication or one of the evidence that this chemical could cause the autism spectrum disorder transgenerationally through degeneration. It can give us some kind of a clue that the same thing is happening to humans. So it's a kind of a warning signal.
The experiment indicates that sodium valproate can travel through DNA and afflict successive generations with mental health problems. The findings are already triggering concern amongst experts on fetal Valproate syndrome. Dr. Rebecca Bromley is a leading neuroscientist, and she believes the need for more research in this area is urgent.
That was the first bit of evidence that we had in any species that potentially this can be carried on to the next generation. Before this paper came out, we just didn't know. We had no evidence that it was going to be something that was an issue, and we were still learning about the longer term effects on the individual who'd been exposed directly to the drug. This is something now that needs to be looked at as quickly as possible to give families some reassurance.
Today, Tanya and Natalie are heading to Liverpool's Walton Health Centre. They want to get their children assessed for fetal valproate syndrome.
I'd like you to try this next one for me, please.
Neuropsychologist Professor Gus Baker is the lead author of the most comprehensive research programme ever conducted into children born to mothers with epilepsy.
What I want to be looking at is how this young boy is developing.
Hello. Hi.
The first one, can you draw me a house? Okay? I'll be trying to get an overall picture of how he's developing in relation to how, for example, his peers are developing.
And I've drawn some flowers and leaves and gate and a path.
So I know you can't give us a definitive diagnosis, but what are your thoughts after that assessment?
Well, obviously it's going to take me a little while to score up the test results, but when I've done that, I'll be looking at his strengths and weaknesses, and I'll be identifying them and trying to map them on to what we understand about sodium valproate and how it affects children. And then I'll probably be in a good position to provide a formulation of what I think has happened to him and what we might be able to do to ameliorate those difficulties that he's clearly having.
Even though it could be years before the full extent to which her grandchildren are affected is known, Sue believes the drug she first took nearly 4 decades ago has caused infinite damage to her family's lineage.
I do think my grandkids have been affected by it. I've had my worry with my kids growing up. I've got the worry again with my grandkids. How long is it going to go on for? It's not fair at all. It's not fair. It's so wrong. So many people's lives have been affected and ruined.
The transgenerational impact of fetal valproate syndrome could potentially remain with families for centuries, leading to demands around the world that Sanofi, the company who originally manufactured the drug, pay compensation to those affected. What would justice look like to you and the other families?
Justice is to recognize they are guilty and recognize they must give money to that child to have a good life, because now the treatment are very expensive for the family and they need money to pay that.
In France, Marine's charity is campaigning to hold the company to account. Her protests have helped force the French government to provide millions of euros of backing.
The government decided to create a special fund to help victims. There is a fund that is organizing all the expertise, appoint the doctors and pay the doctors, and who are going to say who will have to pay. If the firm does not pay, the French state will pay on behalf of the firm and then will bring a claim against the firm to get the money back.
In the UK, however, a long battle to get compensation has failed to receive any government backing. In fact, in 2010, a landmark court case by affected families had to be abandoned after legal aid was withdrawn.
In England, the victims are in a very, very bad situation. It is the responsibility of the government and the parliament to help the victims. And it's the victims first. That's what they did in France. And it's, for us, unbelievable that the English democracy does not work properly and does not help the people. The people must put pressure on their government for that.
It's a rallying call that charities in the UK are championing. Emma and Janet are at the forefront of the campaign.
We're here today for a meeting with the Minister to discuss the possibility of a care package for the children that have been affected by valproate.
The care package is more important because of the transgender link now. The fact that our grandchildren could be affected, you know, with neurodevelopment disorders, possible heart malformations, they need care and support.
For us, it is a government issue. The government have to take responsibility on that matter and make sure that these children are fully looked after. We're finding that as they get older, as a parent in particular, my two are a lot older now, they're in their 20s, and it's a worrying factor for me because I'm not always going to be here to take care of the kids, and, you know, to live an independent life is going to be really, really difficult for them.
Janet's two grown-up sons, both of whom suffer with the syndrome, are completely dependent and still live at home. Philip is more seriously affected.
I'm 25 now and symptoms are I can't concentrate for a long. I've got when I go outside, my social interaction is zero, and I'm very apprehensive with going anywhere really.
Both of Janet's sons have suffered with neurological problems since birth, and 2 years ago, doctors discovered that Philip, like many maturing sufferers of fetal valproate syndrome, had developed yet another condition.
After I've finished my college course that I've been for 8 years, I was diagnosed with epilepsy, stress-related epilepsy, and it's really hard for me to. It's really hard to. Yeah, it's hard for me to describe the symptoms, but I know it's really, really difficult to live with.
I think it's disgusting the way the government are acting. I think they should pay compensation to all these babies that have grown up now to young adults that are struggling.
It goes...
Any kind of compensation, however, might come too late to help children like Bridget.
The coffin I've designed is important because it represents my Bridget, because it's a design of an angel and it's got her face on it. It breaks my heart. I've picked this plot because it's a lovely cemetery. I didn't want to choose a cemetery yet, but because of how my daughter's deteriorating so rapidly, I needed to do it because I won't be able to do it once she does pass away. Mothers shouldn't have to bury their daughter. No mother should do that. My family, we're mourning now and will be the day like I lose my little girl.
If you're concerned about any of the information you've seen in this film, please contact your family doctor urgently. Do not stop taking any medication prescribed by your doctor without speaking to them first.
Hello there, welcome to a longer world weather roundup. We'll start with North America, and we've got some very cold air looming across northern states of the US. Of course, very cold air across most of Canada too, but it is unusually warm across this southwest quadrant of the United States, with temperatures a little above normal for parts of central southern California. It's going to remain dry here. The wildfire risk does remain high too, but on Sunday we're looking at some very wet weather from the deep south stretching across the southeast in towards the middle Atlantic states and up into the northeast and New England. So some heavy rain here, a lot of cloud around on Sunday as it impacts the cold air across the Great Lakes. And we're looking at some pretty heavy snow there too, potentially disruptive like we saw in Chicago over the last 24 hours. For much of Mexico, Central America and the Caribbean, a quiet story on Sunday. 1 or 2 showers or thunderstorms around, but the emphasis really will be on dry and sunny weather with pretty decent temperatures. Now for South America, it's very wet, swathe of very heavy rain, central northern parts of Brazil, also across Bolivia and in towards parts of Peru, with Andean parts of Ecuador and Colombia seeing some pretty heavy downpours at times too. Now into Europe, it looks like it's going to stay cold across this southwest corner. Some snow across northern Spain, further snow there in towards the Alps. And we're looking at some wet and windy weather pushing on in towards northern Europe, certainly in towards Scandinavia as we head on into Monday. Into Africa, central southern areas, we'll see the heavy rain and the thunderstorms. A few spells of heavy rain also for Cape Town, but it will be very short-lived. It looks like the hot sunshine will make a return here, just adding to the dangerous drought conditions here. And to the Middle East, it's a quiet story on Monday. A little bit of cloud across Iraq, maybe a few showers there just north of Baghdad, but I think generally speaking should be dry for most places. A fine outlook as well for Sunday on into Monday across South Asia. There'll be a few showers breaking out across central northern areas, but apart from that, it's dry, sunny, and it's very warm. In fact, hot across the south, 31 degrees there for Colombo. Now some cold air running around this northern periphery of high pressure for northeastern parts of China, pushing on in towards the Korean Peninsula, and a weather front across Japan will move away, but we'll see increasing amounts of snow here in the next couple of days. Fine but cool conditions there for Hong Kong, 14 degrees, hot and sunny there for the Indochina Peninsula, 32 Celsius for Bangkok. And the threat of some very heavy rain in the Philippines, all tied in with a tropical cyclone, which will continue to move in from the east as we head into the middle part of the week. Heat really building across the south and the southeast of Australia again on Monday, shifting its way a little bit further eastward, so it's going to turn hotter as well for the likes of Brisbane too. Some pretty intense thunderstorms across Western Australia, and looks like it'll continue wet and windy across a swathe of New Zealand.
Would you trust a flying taxi?
We are at the very ground level of an entirely new part of the aviation business.
How about a plane with no pilot and no jet fuel engine?
A significant percentage of aircraft emergencies are caused by human error. By having the computers take over, you can actually further increase the safety.
An aerospace revolution is coming.
It's going to change the way we live.
New technologies are promising cleaner, greener aviation.
The drive to contribute to the environmental considerations is huge.
And more affordable flights.
It's a market expansion to making aviation more accessible.
But will it be possible to win over consumers?
What I'm really excited about, though, is making aviation personal, achieving that dream of the flying car.
Meet the disruptors of aerospace.
We're revolutionizing the business, the industry, the world.
Discover now at bbc.com/thedisruptors.